Now, too, of course, the rememoration of the Nakba, and it was the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians during the 1948 start of a genocide there through violent displacement and dispossession of land, property, belongings, along with the destruction of their society, culture, identity, political rights, and national aspirations. During the Nakba in 1948, approximately half of Palestine's predominantly Arab population, around 750,000 people, were displaced. As awareness continues to grow, many forms of media have taken center stage, highlighting what had happened in 1948 and fast forwarding now to the current genocide in Gaza. Joining us now, I'd like to welcome Ahmed Mansour, who is an award-winning filmmaker and visionary from Gaza. He did his master's in news and film at New York University. Before moving to the US in 2015, he made a series of short films highlighting the humanitarian crisis in the Gaza Strip. Ahmed, assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and shukran so much for joining us.
Wa alaikum assalam, Brother Fahraz. Thank you for having me.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. And of course, we did meet each other during the Global Anti-Apartheid Conference. So I'm glad that you are joining us here, even if it is virtually through our studios in Cape Town. Ahmed, when we look, of course, what had happened in 1948, and we saw, even if it is through the black and white images, and we fast forward now 76 years on, when we see the images, be it either from social media or certain news networks that are willing to show a real side of the genocide in Gaza, there's such a stark reality of similarities, isn't there, to the difference 76 years has made, and of course that quest in fighting for the liberation of Palestine.
Yes, first, I am very happy to be in South Africa for the first time. And I'm very thankful for the warm welcome and to show my work in this beautiful country. First, we can look at what is happening now from two lenses. The first lens is through the suffering of the Palestinian people, of my family in Gaza Strip. Now we are in the 7th month of the genocide. We have over 42,000 people are being dead, with over 8,000 under the rubble, 17,000 of children and women. And this is just unacceptable. On the other hand, what we are witnessing now in terms of the global uprising from the United States to Europe, to Australia, to New Zealand, to here, South Africa, this global uprising is unprecedented. And as you said, what happened in 1948, and we commemorate today the 76th anniversary of it, is what is happening in Gaza now. But there is a big difference. What happened in 1948, and me as a filmmaker, we have been struggling to prove through different mediums that the 1948 was a genocide. What happened there was an ethnic cleansing. What happened there was tremendous human rights abuses. But the Zionist Hasbara has been so powerful to the level that the civilized world, led by the United States, never take actions to bring justice to the Palestinians. So what is happening now in Gaza, in terms of the genocide being televised for the 7th month, now the whole world is seeing that and is saying, wow, that is what has been happening since 1948, but we didn't know. Now everyone knows, and everyone now is acting out. We're seeing that through the different ways of activism, from the encampment, from protests, from civil disobedience, and from having public demonstrations against what's happening.
Ahmed, when we look at the images of 1948, of course, in the black and white, and I remember a documentary from Al Jazeera showing it there, the bombing of the King David Hotel by the Haganah and various other Zionist paramilitary operatives, and you see the sadness on the faces of many of those who had to be displaced. 30 years on, there's interviews with them, and you can hear from their voice the sadness there. And you look at what's happening now in Gaza, and you listen to the cries of mothers and the cries of fathers and the cries of children, and you would know best being there from Gaza. And it resonates so much, doesn't it, that 76 years on, the narrative from a Western perspective, and I remember you spoke about it with me over the weekend, for the brief minutes that we were there, that it's just a normality for the West, but for the people of Palestine, this is the everyday lived reality.
That's correct, and it's been really there were we Palestinians we've been fighting two battles. The first battle, which is the battle on the ground, and the second battle, it's the battle of the narrative, and they're equally important because you can win a battle on the ground, but you can lose it in terms of the narrative. And let's be clear, for the last 75 years, we have been resisting, we have been steadfasting, we have been teaching the entire world what it means to use different mediums of resistance. But in terms of the narrative, we achieved little breakthroughs. But since October 7th, it's been really a huge breakthrough in terms of the narrative of the Palestinian people. Before October 7th, the Palestinian cause was getting to the lowest point ever because of the Arab countries' efforts to normalize relations with Israel, with the ex-President Trump moving the US embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem and recognizing Jerusalem as the Jewish capital, by the different governments of the world creating economic relations and huge investments with Israel. But since October the 7th, we acknowledge that the toll have been very heavy. Personally, I lost my baby sister, Shayma, and her almost 2 years old daughter. I lost over 50 cousins of my family. But at the same time, now the whole world is changing. And we become to live in a very pivotal time, not only in terms of the Palestinian liberation, but in terms of the global change of the world order that is now being called by the whole world as morally bankrupt, and the need to not only rebuild Gaza and bring liberation to Palestine, but to rebuild the world order to make it morally based rather than capitalistic and immorally based.
And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant your family, those who have passed on, Jannatul Firdaus, inshallah, I mean, as they have died, of course, as martyrs. Ahmed, we've got 2 minutes before we go to the break. I want you to get your take on what is happening in the United States of America, the student protest, even though the government of the United States has approved another 1 billion rand or so of funding of arms for Israel. The civil society is rising up against the government, isn't they? We see it in South Africa here with the student protests, of course, albeit our government here in South Africa has really shown solidarity with Palestine. But how important has the voice of the youth been in the United States in terms of the opposition to its government?
When you look at the United States, we have to differentiate between the official stance and, as you said, the civil society. In terms of the government and the President Biden, their stance in terms of sympathizing and saying, talking the talk, they're doing that brilliantly, and they are kind of feel for the Palestinian people. But when you look at their actions, you get very disappointed because since October 7th, they have been approving billions worth of weapons, missiles, war jets. And as you said, President Biden has just approved another shipment of weapons. At the same time, we have to look at the resistance within the United States, um, different communities. For example, the students' encampment. Right before I came to South Africa, I was at the George Washington University in Washington, D.C., and I was at the Columbia University right before they destroyed the encampment there. Let me tell you, the spirit, the energy is remarkable. These students are acting upon the very values that their Ivy League universities teach them. Yet, their schools and universities are calling the police on them. So, what is that creating is a huge rift within the American society. And this is the crack that we, the Palestinian people and activists and our allies, have been waiting. Now the crack is widening between the American official stance that have been providing the Zionist entity with weapons, money, and legal coverage, and between the civil society and the different students' bodies within the United States. And this is exactly where we have to keep working to widen that crack until the American leadership listens to their own people and stop supporting the Zionist regime.
After the break, I continue my conversation with Ahmed Mansour. We're going to be focusing on the role of media, such as films, and how it's continuing to bring awareness to not just the American public or even here in South Africa, but across the news here on Hilaal TV. Now, we've seen various films even launched by the Hadid family to go ahead and bring a difference of a narrative. And I want to bring you into this conversation, Ahmed, because you're part of Palestine Films, and it's a company that is with its aims of promoting Palestinian films in a way to highlight just how human Palestinian people are and the fact that they just want to enjoy the universal human rights that is enjoyed by so many people across the world. I had the maker of Farha, Darin J. Salam, a couple of months ago, and she spoke to how important that movie was in discussing the Nakba. Talk to us about Palestine Films and, of course, your role in filmmaking and how that is bringing awareness, not just in the United States of America or right now while you're here in South Africa, but across the globe.
Yes, again, as we talked before, there are two battles that we have been fighting: the battle on the ground and the battle narrative-wise and story-wise. So when I finished high school and I had to choose what I need to study, like every young Palestinian, I chose language because the first decolonization that has to happen is through the language. So I had to study English language so that I understand what this global system that takes place through, first, the English language, second, their economic powers, third, through their military power. After I finished studying language, and then I decided to move to study filmmaking. Because, as you said, the power of storytelling might change any injustice in the world. But first, we have to know our own story. We have to own our story, and we have to act out of it. And then try in a way to tell it to different audiences. And when I say audiences, I have to underline here because, for example, I had a screening last night to a white South African crowd. after the screening of Angel of Gaza, one
Gaza,
of my
yes.
short films, it's been really quite interesting to see how they react to it. And then in Johannesburg, we had another screening for the Jewish activists and to see how their reactions to it. And I compare it to the the screening tomorrow that I'm gonna have to the Muslims. And I remember the screenings in the US and how the different audiences react to it. Let me tell you, when you tell a good story, different audiences interpret it in a different way. And that's the beauty of filmmaking, that different groups identify with your story in different ways. And this is when true change starts happening. When you know how to tell your story and how the nature and to know the nature of your audience so that you curate these stories too. And it's been a great journey for me because in the United States is the power that has been enabling our own suffering through supporting the state of Israel financially and militarily. And it's been wonderful to change many hearts and minds and to see their awakening right as they watch your film. It's been really a pleasant journey.
Ahmed, I got one final question because time is against us. We've seen movies about the Holocaust like Schindler's List and The Pianist and The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, amongst so many, create movement on what had happened in the Holocaust. And of course, we see movies like Farha. And I remember watching Farha and how it shook me or educated me about what the Nakba is. How important is filmmaking, storytelling, like what you are doing right now, going to in the future, if not today, maybe in 5 years' time, educate audiences who have been totally ignorant or unknown of what the Nakba has done, what is happening in the genocides that occurred in Gaza, for them to finally understand the cause of the Palestinian people.
Yes, this is the responsibility that we have as an artist. And when you said Farha, I shared the stage with the filmmaker in Chicago, and again, you can see the audiences how they respond to that. And when you said that you know to educate the audiences, I don't believe there is an ignorant um, audience. Every one of us is an ignorant until we learn.
Sure.
And we when we know, we also have to provide the tools so that when these audiences learn about the truth, then what shall they do about it? And this is another layer to the filmmakers that we have been discussing in the filmmaking scenery in the United States and across the world, is that what tools that we should equip the audiences with as they are learning about the injustices that's been happening in Palestine, especially now while the genocide is happening. We cannot afford only to educate, but we have to educate and find a way to equip these audiences with the right tools as they are getting out of their comfort zone and learning about this 76 years of genocide, displacement, ethnic cleansing, and so on. So I feel that there is a wave of not only Palestinian artists and filmmakers, but also people of conscience. They are telling stories, highlighting the injustices in Palestine and around the world. Because what's happening in Gaza, it's happening in Kashmir, it's happening in the Sudan, it's happening in Lebanon, it's happening in the West, and we should not differentiate between any injustice. So again, filmmaking is a tool that that's perfect to bring more people to the struggle globally.
Ahmed, shukran so much for making the time for us here on Hilaal TV, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you with everything good in the storytelling that you are going to be, conducting on so many occasions. And may we see a free Palestine, inshallah, that both you and I can go ahead and walk into. Shukran so much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
That is
Thank you
Ahmed.
for having me, brother.
Absolute pleasure. It's Ahmed Mansour, a filmmaker from Gaza in Palestine.